Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at Oros. Now the theme in this one is each player is taking on the role of a demigod who can shape the landscape beneath them by shifting and moving the landmasses on the board to create mountains and volcanoes. All the while you're going to be having your followers build temples to their demigod, which allow the demigods to ascend to greater heights. And of course, the first one to reach the highest point is going to be the winner. Now the mechanisms in this one are some that I almost always enjoy in games. You have a set of actions in front of you that you're going to be taking with your followers, but you can't take that action again until you move that follower to a different action to free it up. Each action can be made more powerful by getting wisdom. You have the option to get more followers during the game, and the main game board itself shifts on everyone's turn. Now this game is going to be right up my alley, I can just feel it. So, will this game ascend to the highest tier of gaming, or will it just be buried and forgotten? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and then we'll come back to my final thoughts on Oros. So this is Oros set up for 3 players. I've set up the tiles on the first time player board, which is slightly smaller. There is a larger map on the other side of the board. The board is made up of hotspots, which create new islands if they are left uncovered. The map is also connected on all sides, so if something goes off one edge, it just appears on the other side. And the arrows show you which of the corner pieces are connected, so if this tile moves, it's going to follow the arrow here. The land masses are made up of land tiles. They range from islands all the way up to mountains. Mountains will be the spots where the players will be building their sacred sites, which is one of the major ways to get points in the game. All the extra landmass tiles, along with the volcanoes leveled 1 to 4, are placed off to the side. The ascension track is placed near the board with a demigod for each player at the bottom. On a player's mat, they will have their followers and wisdom caps. The mat is split up into the actions you can take on your turn, and the strength of the action is shown by your wisdom cap. There are also study spaces to send your followers to increase your wisdom. At the start of the game, you're going to have 3 of your followers on the side of your mat. When all the wisdom caps of the first 5 actions are reached that level, that worker will be unlocked. I'll talk a bit about that later. You'll also start with 1 follower on the build action, 1 on the journey action, and the other 3 will be placed on your first turn. You'll also have a set of sacred sites, 3 of each size. Now you will win this game by getting the most knowledge points. You're going to gain knowledge points by building sacred sites, gaining wisdom to move up your tracks on your actions, and you'll score points for your sacred sites based on their wisdom tracks. The game will end when 1 player ascends to the top spot on the ascension board. On a player's very first turn, they will all do the same thing. Place 1 of their workers on an unoccupied island. Next, take 2 actions by placing your workers on the action space. So let's assume the player's already done that. We'll go to the next turn, which will be a better example. So on your subsequent turns, you're going to get 3 actions. An action is to move 1 of your followers from an action spot to another empty action spot on your player mat. You cannot place them back into the same action. If there are no actions you can take, which can happen fairly often during the game, you must move 1 of your workers from an action spot other than the send action to the study space. This will count as your action. Remember that the action you are freeing up is as important as the action you are currently taking. So let's have a look at the actions. The shift action allows you to shift an entire row or column the number of spaces as listed on your shift wisdom track. You cannot shift a row or column that has a mountain in it unless you have unlocked that wisdom ability. When you shift, the tiles wrap around the board, but must maintain the spaces between them. So if we shift this row, it's going to look like this. The move action allows you to move a set of tiles as shown on your wisdom track. At the start of the game, you have to move a set of 3 connected tiles exactly 1 space. And it's only those 3 tiles that move, so if they collide with another landmass, you're going to be increasing that landmass. When 2 tiles collide, add their values together and replace them with a tile of that new value. If that total is above 4, add volcanoes to make up the remainder. If 2 tiles collide with volcanoes, first do the tiles, then add together the volcanoes and replace with a new volcano which equals the remainder of the tile collision and the sum of the existing volcanoes. A tile can have any number of volcanoes on it. If there are followers on a colliding tile, they will both be on the new tile. If 2 level 4 tiles collide, they're going to form a mountain, and this is the only way new mountains can be added to the map. The next action is to either place or erupt a volcano. To place a volcano, you're going to place a new level 3 volcano in any spot on the map. Or you can erupt a volcano. Pick a volcano on the map. The number of the volcano is the amount of landmass it's going to be adding to the board. So a level 3 volcano will add 3 landmass to the map. First, it's going to fill up its own landmass up to 4. Then any leftover will flow in one direction. So if there was a 3 volcano here that erupted, it will first fill up its tile to 4, then the remainder will flow into the next tile, and this continues until all the lava has been used. Once it's all been used, the volcano is removed from the map. The next action is the send to or return from study. To send to study, select any other follower from an action space and place it on an unoccupied study spot. At the start of the game, you only have 2 study spots, but as you build sacred sites, you can also add a follower there to study as well. But you are limited to the number of followers you can have on the map. It starts with 1, but can be increased through the wisdom track. Instead of sending a follower to study, you can return up to 2 followers from studying. Remove it from its study position and place it on an unoccupied action space on your map. If you have no unoccupied action spaces, you cannot return any followers. Now you do not get to perform the action that it's placed on, but that action is now occupied. For each follower you return, you get 1 wisdom. Now whenever you get wisdom, you can increase one of your wisdom tracks. If you get multiple wisdom from one action, you can split the wisdom up however you want. The journey action allows you to move one of your followers on the map up to your wisdom track. At the start, you can only move 1 space. You cannot cross water nor end your movement on a tile with another follower. Now both of these can be removed by advancing on the wisdom track. When a mountain has 1 or more sacred sites on it, each step can hold 1 follower. So the mountain has a space and each sacred spot has a space for a follower. When going up or down a sacred site, each step counts towards a step of your step limit. The final action is to build a sacred site. You can only build a sacred site on a mountain space where you do not already have one of your sacred sites, and one of your followers is either on the mountain space or another player's sacred site space on the mountain. Each mountain can only hold 1 of each of the different size sacred sites, and each player can only ever have 1 sacred site per mountain. The sites must be built in order from largest to smallest. When you place your sacred site on the mountain, move your follower to the new sacred site, and they are now studying there. You gain 2 ascension points, move your demigod up 2 spaces on the ascension track, and if you end on a space with another demigod, just go to the next free space. You also gain wisdom depending on the size of the sacred site. The largest gives you 1 wisdom, then 2, then 3 wisdom for the topmost sacred site. Your sacred sites now count as additional spots you can send your followers to when you take the send to or return from study action. Just remember that you are limited by the number of followers you can have on the board. If you build a sacred site and another player has a follower studying on the same mountain, they're going to receive 1 wisdom point. There are a few other minor rules. If at the end of an action there is a hot spot that's empty on the board, they're going to receive an island tile. As well, as you move up the ascension track, the first person to land on or pass one of these red spaces, you'll be adding a +2 volcano to all tiles over the hot spots. One last thing is the horizontal lines. When you're able to get your wisdom hats on the first 5 actions to or past a horizontal line, you unlock an extra worker. This worker can either be placed on a study spot or on an action space, and you can take that action in addition to your regular 3 actions on your turn. The game ends when 1 demigod reaches the top space. That round is finished, then we go to final scoring. You score points based on your position on the ascension track. You get points for any abilities you're able to get your wisdom hat far enough on. You get points for the followers who are on study spots based on the highest unlocked horizontal line. And you get points for your sacred sites based on what you've unlocked on the wisdom tracks. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about Oros. So, theme and components. The theme in this one is interesting and it works reasonably well. The feeling of controlling the landmasses is definitely a fun one. Just don't look too closely at the connection between the theme and the mechanisms in the game as it starts to break down. And the idea of sliding versus moving doesn't make much thematic sense, and I had a fair number of people getting confused at the beginning of how those actions worked because of the thematic tie-in. Overall though, again, the theme is an interesting one, but once you start playing, that theme goes right out the window. For the components, I think they're pretty good. The player boards are just kind of thick paper, but they are a large size, so you can definitely see all the tracks and all the action spaces across the bottom. The board itself are easy to read, as are the tiles and the volcanoes. The other cardboard components are fine as well. I don't really have any complaints, but overall I did just find them okay. The art, again, is fine. And I'm not saying any of the components are bad. It's definitely a decent package, but on the table, just didn't wow me. So on to the gameplay. I'm going to start with a bunch of good stuff. The game has a lot of things I like. The main mechanisms of managing your workers on the action spaces is a really interesting puzzle. Which action space you're freeing up is just as important as the current action you are taking. This means that you need to be pre-planning your entire 3 actions, as you can get yourself into problems if you don't by not having the right actions free when you want to take them. Now there is always an out when you can't take an action at all. You can send one of your workers to study, and that's probably going to happen more often than I would have liked in a game like this, but at least it's a way out. The whole idea of the tracks is also something I always enjoy. When you get wisdom, which track do you raise? I mean, they're all useful. Do you concentrate on just a few tracks to try and get the points at the top, or do you raise them all slowly to free up your extra followers? The Sacred Site Wisdom tracks, again, maybe not useful during the game, but can be worth a fair number of points at the end of the game, so you can't really ignore these. you're not going to get enough wisdom during the game to raise all of your tracks to the maximum. So you have to be making some good, meaningful decisions when you do get that wisdom. I also kind of enjoyed the way that you got wisdom. Sending followers off to study frees up action spaces, which can be vital. And when you return them, that's when you get the wisdom. But the fact that they have to go back on actions without being able to take those actions is always an interesting dilemma. Or maybe you just leave a follower studying on a sacred site and hopefully someone's going to build on top of yours, so you're going to get wisdom that way. So seeing what the other players are up to is always critical in this game. Now, another key rule to this game is you can't have more than one sacred site per mountain. This stops players from going off into a corner and just building all of their sites on one mountain. Couple that with the limited number of sacred sites players have, mean that you have to be building on other players' sacred sites. So in some ways, parts of this game feels almost not cooperative, maybe semi-cooperatives, but it is, it's a purely competitive game, but the need to build on other people's sacred sites means that you don't want to isolate the mountain areas from other people and, kind of make a little corner to yourself, because you're going to be kind of limited to what you can do there. So as you can see, there's a lot of interesting mechanisms going on in this game. All things that, on paper, I should really enjoy. But, and this is what kills this game for me, it's too slow, frustrating, and it ultimately ended up being boring to me. The slowness comes because it's a puzzle to solve on your turn, on every player's turn. They give you planning tokens which you can lay out, and with some bluff tokens, I think, but I found the game just kind of went on forever. Not because any one player had analysis paralysis, but because your turns just naturally take time. But why don't you just pre-plan your turns? So when it comes, you can just go bang, 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 done. Well, that kind of leads me to my second issue. I found this game to be immensely frustrating because of the high player interaction. Now, some players are absolutely going to love that there's this high level of player interaction in a Euro game, but it just didn't appeal to me at all. You can't know what you're going to do on your turn until it's your turn. The board state will change with every player's actions. Even seeing what they're going to do, if they're using their planning tokens, doesn't really help. They say they're going to slide and move. Okay, but what's going where? I can plan to journey and build. But if the land gets taken away from me, well, I guess that's not happening. I have to change my plan. And when you do have a plan that takes more than one turn to do, well, good luck with trying to pull it off. When it was my turn, I just looked at the board and trying to figure out what I could do with my 3 actions, because planning any further than that seemed to be almost pointless. Sometimes it worked out, but often it didn't, and that led me to be frustrated with the game a lot of the time. Now, those 2 strikes for me just led me to kind of be bored with the game. I was not engaged with it and felt often that I just wanted the game to be over because of how much I was not enjoying it. Now, I have played at various player counts, and honestly, there isn't one I really liked. I thought, this was going to be great for 2 players, but at 2 players, you have a third dummy player, which is just making moves randomly based on the deck of cards. So, when I recommend this one, I wouldn't, with a caveat. Out of the people I played with, some of them really disliked this game, and unfortunately, I was in that group, but others really enjoyed it. So I'm not saying this is a bad game. I'm saying I didn't enjoy it, and it may be worth a play for you. With that being said, there are a lot of good things in here. The core mechanisms are interesting and well implemented. I like the puzzly nature of the action selection process of making sure you're freeing up the right actions to be used at the right time. I kind of like the shifting board idea and the new line process, and I love the tracks and spending my wisdom, wisely. I felt I was often making real meaningful decisions with that. Which wisdom track do I go up? Something that's going to strengthen my action right now, or go for end of game scoring? And all the action enhancements, all of these things here, everything is useful on this board. So every decision you make is interesting. I also like that they had a bunch of ways to set up the board to try different starting configurations at the back of the rulebook. But for me, the downtime of this game, as each player has to figure out what actions they want to do and how they're going to achieve them on their turn, was just too long for me to really enjoy the game. The game state changes so much in between turns, especially at 4 players. It made pre-planning almost pointless, and because of the tightness of the actions, you might have actions on the previous turn which you now kind of are useless. I normally like tight games, where it's an effort to achieve what you want, but because of the high player action in this game, it went from enjoyment to frustration very quickly. Overall, though, I'm going to give this game a 6 out of 10. I'm sure there are many people out there who are really going to enjoy this game, but this is one of those games where I like all the individual pieces that make up the game, and I feel like I should like it, and maybe that's why my rating is a bit higher than I would normally have, but the game as a whole is just not something I want to play again. And I find it even more frustrating because there's nothing I can point to say, if they change this one thing, I would like this game. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.